All right, so thank you all for listening in on this discussion around the adoption of AI within the commercial real estate investment industry. There has been no shortage of discussion on this topic, of course. It's top of mind for folks at every level, at every organization in real estate, and in every other industry. Much of that discussion has revolved around what these tools can do, the exciting use cases folks have discovered. There's also been a lot of debate about the relative benefits and risks for the industry and for society as a whole. Talk about impact on jobs, the economy, the markets. And while there are many fascinating aspects of this technology, one that stands out to me is the rate at which it's being adopted. It makes the adoption of the internet, for example, seem glacial. Real estate as an industry is famously not usually at the forefront of new tech. Real estate companies are not usually early adopters, but this time around, it is different. We speak to dozens of firms every week, and almost without exception, everyone we talk to is well beyond the initial experimentation phase with these tools. Adoption is moving quickly, which does not leave a lot of time for learning and increases the likelihood of mistakes. And in this environment, learning from the experience of others is very important. So to dive into where we are, what we've learned so far, how our thinking is evolving on a whole array of issues, I'm joined here today. We'll be checking in with and getting perspectives of two very thoughtful and knowledgeable members of the real estate investment community. We have Graham Russell, Senior Vice President Americas at QuadReal on their investment team, and Dave Welk, Managing Director and Head of Equity Investments at Origin Investments. Graham, Dave, thank you both for being here, for agreeing to take part in this conversation. I'm going to start this off, and I'm sure we'll end up talking about all kinds of things, but I'm going to start off with the same question for both of you, which is, sticking with this theme of learning, what is the biggest lesson each of you has learned recently about how best to leverage, AI effectively, at your firms or even within your personal lives? Dave, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Raj. Good to be on with you today. So I think the biggest lesson that we've kind of learned over the past several months and years on our AI journey is that it's best to get the most value from it when it's embedded into your actual workflow. So not sitting alongside of it. And we've adopted six or seven different distinct AI tools over the past couple of years. And these are the ones that really move the needle the most. And these are the ones where the teams don't have to leave their existing process to use them, and ones that require a separate login or a separate habit. So those are the ones that the ones that have friction, I think, are the ones that stall in terms of their adoption. But yeah, that would be it. The ones that are kind of seamlessly integrated into your daily life.
Makes sense. Before I ask a follow-up on that, Graham, what's been your biggest learning recently?
Raj, it's great to be here and thank you. I think as of recently, the, the biggest learning for myself personally has been just the need to be continuously curious and questioning even what the status quo is. We've seen over the last, really, I mean, throughout 2026, the pace at which these tools have been updated and can frankly change really requires organizations and individuals to continually be questioning, is this the right way to do it? Can I be more efficient? Is there a new and better way of getting this task done? I completely agree with Dave. I mean, the importance of integrating that into your overall workflow is critical. The point solutions are becoming a thing of the past, but even these new solutions and the time that we spend integrating and deploying them, you're constantly looking at what's next, and trying to think through, is this a sustainable architecture that we've built here, or is this something that will continue to change, and there may be something better out there in the next month.
Yeah, you both alluded to this idea of kind of designing systems. You used the word architecture, Graham, right? Dave talked about point solutions and sort of being embedding solutions into workflows. Traditionally, that task of thinking through an architecture or a workflow or a system, any of those things it was something that you had some time to do, right? You could sort of come up with an idea of the future state, build a plan to get there, put the pieces in place. And Graham, you alluded to the fact that today things are changing so quickly that it's really tough to sort of commit yourself to any direction without the need to stay vigilant around your assumptions and revisit those assumptions pretty frequently. So I want to maybe take this in a bit of direction here around kind of what you both sort of mentioned around sort of this overall architecture. Systems versus agents, right? Dave, you mentioned meeting people where they are and not having to sort of move across different systems. Graham, you mentioned point solutions are dying. How do you think about agents versus systems, and how those both relate to friction and adoption within your teams? Dave, maybe I'll have you start again.
Yeah, I mean, I think the two go hand in hand. I mean, I think the agents help you do very specific work in functions, right? If they're prompted well and they're fully integrated. But, I think that another, part of the overall takeaway here is that if you don't have well-structured, well-organized data, even an agent can do the task effectively because it's going to leverage, it can leverage a few different things. It can leverage publicly available data, which, there's a lot of that out there. And I think an agent can get you 80% of the way there in terms of what it can access from different systems that are publicly available. But the last 20% is where the sausage is really made. And so I think the companies that have well-organized proprietary data can leverage the agent to really hone in on the specific tasks that they're looking the agent to complete. But we have a system that we have built in partnership with a third-party provider where it integrates our entire one site, OneDrive capabilities. So all of our documentation is pulled into a centralized system that has an LLM layer on top of it. But we're not even done yet in terms of organizing the data to make that system fully functional, fully efficient. We're kind of having to piecemeal it up into, by division. So legal has their own initiative, which has its own kind of guardrails around it, accounting, and then we have investor relations and then the deal teams that I oversee. So we're just kind of we're at the tip of the iceberg in terms of cleaning, organizing data to make the system work efficiently. And then we're layering in agents on top of that for very specific tasks for underwriting, deal evaluation, forecasting. So I think you need to have both, but both are going to fail if you don't have the right foundation infrastructure built.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is the agents are doing the work, but what allows them to do the work well and potentially, better than others is the systems and data you have in place. And Graham, I know that's been a big topic at QuadReal as well. I think one of our recent catch-ups you mentioned looking at just a lot of new data sources, data feeds to sort of try to use with these tools. Maybe carrying on from what Dave started with there. How are you at QuadReal thinking about data and systems and agents and how they sort of either interdepend or support one another?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Dave alluded to and is absolutely what we're thinking about right now is how important and critical context is for using these AI models and LLMs. The context, whether that be structured data or whether that be through a prompt, is so critical to make them efficient. And when we think about context, we're not just thinking about what may be included in that prompt, but it really comes down to how are the systems behind those agents structured such that it can give the right context for that particular problem. And we're seeing this, throughout problems that we're trying to solve, whether that be from, an underwriting or investment perspective. Is it referencing the right data set? Does it have the context? How does that relate to other data sets that we may have access to or be acquiring or building ourselves? So I think really what it comes down to when we talk about systems is providing these tools with that appropriate context for the problem you're trying to solve. and we're spending a lot of time thinking through how to frame that and structure that, such that we can be the most efficient.
Yeah, even in the way that I'm hearing you both describe, sort of the way that you get the most out of agents, the conversation has definitely shifted over the last few months, right? And we remember, 6, 12 months ago, there was the divide was between folks who were using these agents, folks who weren't using these agents, and there was all this stuff being thrown around. You're not going to be replaced by AI; you're going to be replaced by somebody using AI. Fast forward 6 months, and everyone's using AI. So clearly, the agents are no longer, and the models are no longer the threat or the differentiator. It's now about what context can you give the agents? How efficient can you make the agents with the right tools, with the right information? And that sort of takes us into this whole discussion around differentiation, right? Both your firms, like a lot of other real estate firms, are very committed to making the most out of AI, but you all have access to the same models. There's really no differentiation, right? Maybe some firms are using Codex, some firms are using Claude, but you're all fundamentally using a frontier model of some sort. How do you each think about, because you're both working for businesses that need to compete? How do you think about where you get an edge? Either as it relates to your use of AI, or maybe even as relates to things outside the realm of AI. Maybe I'll just to switch things up, I'll ask you to start first this time, Graham. Like, how does QuadReal, or maybe not to put you on the spot for QuadReal, but how does a real estate firm think about an advantage as these commoditized models become used more and more?
Yeah, I'll speak maybe more general terms than specifically to QuadReal. In one way is proprietary data sets. One of the things that we're seeing is that the ability to harvest new and unique data, and connect that into decision making is becoming a lot easier. And so as firms think about what their competitive advantage is, certainly those that have real scale can leverage unique data sets that they may have access to, and the connections that can come from that. I think that's a primary, or that is a real competitive advantage that we're going to see in the market. There's been plenty of sort of aggregations that have happened amongst real estate managers over the last 12 months. Some of that may be the factors in the market today, but also some of that may be aggregating some of the data. And as the large firms get larger, they have access to more competitive data than some of the smaller groups. At the same time, accessing larger data sets for a group that may not own them is becoming easier as well. So is that a true competitive advantage? I think that's a little bit left to be seen. We don't know yet. This pace at which everything is changing is making defining that competitive advantage, or at least the time frame we have to evaluate it, isn't long enough to really determine, yes, this worked, or no, it didn't. But I think those are the things that firms are thinking about. And then also, how do you do more with less? Can you expand even the number of deals that we're looking at or underwriting more efficiently with the human capital that you have, leveraging some of these other tools? Part of that creates a unique data set into itself of, we looked at this number of deals last year, and this is how we would view value. This is where they traded. And those types of that type of backward looking analytics on the team is a really interesting, I think, use case as investment and acquisitions teams look to become more efficient, and to develop their own competitive advantage in the market that way.
Yeah, really interesting. You touched on a couple of, at least 3 points we could actually go further on. So I'll let Dave sort of choose which of those threads he wants to pick up. But I heard unique data sets, scale of that data. But I also heard you sort of talk a bit about, okay, well, your team is now the people you have and the agents. The agents are commoditized, the people aren't. So how do you get the most out of your team? How do you leverage up what you're doing with the people you have? Dave, I'll let you respond to any of those, or even just maybe some things that haven't been mentioned around how you're thinking about differentiation.
Yeah, I mean, Graham touched on a lot of really good and important points in differentiation. I don't have a ton to add in terms of topical information, and we can certainly double click into some of the things that he brought up, but I do want to kind of pull up to 30,000 feet because we are talking about the industry as a whole, not per se, not Origin or QuadReal per se, but I think there is a little bit of we're kind of in our own echo chamber. I think the people that are on this call, because I think we are probably in the top 10 to 20% of adopted users for AI in the industry. I think there's a lot of folks that are out there that may be listening to this podcast who they've heard about AI, that they certainly, I mean, you can't go anywhere without hearing about one of the LLMs and the new breakthroughs that are coming out. But I think there's a lot of folks that haven't even started. They haven't found a way to integrate. And I think there's a lot of questions of how do I use AI in my daily being, right? And I think you've used download Claude and you can use the Claude integration tool into Excel within an hour, you can see the value proposition. So I do think that we in this group here are probably further along than a lot of our peers, especially some of the smaller firms that really haven't used LLMs for modeling purposes, for data for evaluation of their large pools of data. So my advice is get started. I mean, the easiest thing to do is go into Claude and just prompt it, right? Or GPT or any of the other LLMs is just say, how would I integrate this into my workflow? And it's amazing how easy it is to just ask it to provide even better prompts. So it has to be ingrained in the culture. I think at the firm, you have to put this as a high priority item that you want to integrate AI into what you do. But the differentiation side, which is the question, I think there is a distilling down of competitive advantages as we talked about, but the whole 80-20 Pareto principle that I talked about earlier, 80% is that commoditized layer of the LLM that you're going to get. That 20% is where the magic happens. That's your proprietary data. It's how you use it. It's how you interpret it. And I will say the one thing that AI is not going to do for any of us is instill discipline. It'll get you to an answer, maybe a more refined answer more quickly. It'll leverage different systems and data sources efficiently. It may allow you to scale without having to, in terms of investment under management or screening more deal flow without more people, but you're going to still have to remain disciplined in our business at the end of the day. And that, it sounds tongue in cheek, but is very true. And I think that's what is the risk in all this, is that we're going to outsource a lot of our decision making to an AI agent that we've seen over and over again hallucinates all the time. It's not accurate. Like I've been through some of the Claude code that comes out in Excel, and it's just not accurate. So you have to be very, very aware of garbage in, garbage out, and you have to vet the output on these models, especially if you're using it to augment decision making. So that part of it will never be commoditized in my mind. I think we're going to get tons of scale and speed and efficiency. Stay disciplined in, like Graham said at the outset, question the assumptions, right? Question the output. That's the thing that I think we all need to be aware of. And then also, I have a general concern about the next generation of analysts coming into our industry because they don't have a baseline for taking a model or an investment from soup to nuts in the way that, a lot of us were trained in the industry where, there was a lot of trial and error. It was almost an apprenticeship program where you learned how to build a model from scratch. Building an Excel model, it's gone right now. I mean, you can produce an output instantaneously from any one of these LLMs in a model and basically tell it to input certain assumptions. So my concern is as we evolve from here as an industry, what is the next generation of talent? Like, how are they going to develop? I don't have a good answer for that. But it's a real.
Yeah, no, a lot to unpack there. A good reminder that there are still folks out there who are earlier in this learning curve, and some of the pitfalls to avoid. I also heard, discipline is potentially a differentiator, which completely agree. These models allow you to do the right thing really quickly and efficiently. They also allow you to do any number of the wrong things very quickly and efficiently, and they don't help you prioritize or focus or decide what to do, or decide what to do with the information, right? So that layer of focus and discipline, very, very important. No, you see, you mentioned obviously a lot of the things. It sounds like maybe some things you learned, a year or two ago as you were kind of getting into some of these new technologies that are worth bearing in mind for folks who are kind of at that stage now. Graham, I'm curious, when you think about where the pitfalls were, as you kind of made your way through this learning curve, what was the biggest course correction along the way? For the folks out there that Dave just reminded us of that exist, that might be where we were a little while ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dave nailed it when he said, questioning the output is certainly the most. That's the biggest pitfall, and then the second might be, giving up. I do think earlier on in in maybe my personal adoption, but also broadly, perhaps as an organization, it was easy to sort of dismiss some of these tools as less efficient or or less sophisticated or not as smart as they may have been advertised. And I think kind of sticking with it is the best advice to give anyone. One of the really interesting things, and as Dave was speaking, it was reminding me of, it's one of the few times that I've ever come across a tool that can teach you how to use itself. Having basically a personalized tutor, and that can be from everything from structuring prompts, but that can also go into more structured or complex database development. So like there's some really cool things out there that just have using it to teach how to use it is kind of one of the really unique things about this technology, at least in my view.
Yeah, I mean, I echo that for sure. It's and that was probably one of personally one of my biggest learnings early on as well is your instinct is to tell it what to do. But if instead you ask it to ask you what to do, it actually asks really good questions, and you end up telling it, things you might not have thought to tell it, that it knows it needs in terms of context and sort of additional color, right? So putting it in the driver's seat sometimes in terms of asking the questions is helpful. Although you never want to put it in the driver's seat in terms of the outputs, right? You got to remember that it's the subordinate for sure. One of the other things that you mentioned, Graham, earlier that I want to kind of maybe circle back to and get Dave's take on is you mentioned scale and the importance of scale and potentially having unique data sets. You also did allude to the fact that it's getting easier sometimes to aggregate some of this data through third parties and whatnot. Obviously, big difference in sort of the scale at which QuadReal operates and which Origin operates. There's some obvious advantages to being a larger organization. Dave, I'm wondering from your perspective, what are some of the advantages to being, a little bit on smaller and potentially, more agile or, more focused? Like, how do you think about unique advantages related to the size of your organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think starting with the fact that we can play as a much larger organization, we can leverage other third-party data sets, and I can give you some specific examples, but very early on, we built our own proprietary rent forecasting tool called Multilytics. And we've got about 20,000 units that we own or developed internally in to build a very robust rent forecasting model. The thing that we were running up against is we just didn't have sheer enough units, right, to produce the level of granularity that we were looking for to basically feed and train the model. And we ran into a data challenge. And so this was a few years ago, and now there have since been tools that have been developed that you can leverage in the industry that do the same thing. But we were one of the first that I know of that built a web scraping tool to scrape the number of units and basically on a daily basis. So we went from our own internal data set and then a little bit of third party information that we got from rent rolls in the marketplace to creating a web scraping tool that dynamically tracked 11 million units overnight. So I mean, it took us a while to build a scraper and to house the data, but it dramatically improved the model forecasting ability once we were able to intersperse the 11 million of units and track those movements over time. So I think for a company like ourselves where we don't have a Graystar or Blackstone type data set, we can get a lot more information that we typically didn't have access to, and importantly, analyze that data. Because while you can extract the 11 million units worth of data, you still have to have someone to analyze it, right? And to do that efficiently before AI was created, that would have taken a team of folks, weeks to do that. So now we can do that instantaneously. So I think the data or the advantage to a smaller firm is that you can kind of close the data gap a little bit. I know we talked about the advantages being proprietary data set that still exists, but I think the gulf of information gap that existed 2 years ago has been closed pretty dramatically, at least as it relates to multifamily, and that's what we focus on. I think it's still, if you're investing in other product types like industrial and office and retail, it's a little harder to do that, but that's one big advantage. Another thing that I think gives us a unique advantage too is that because we're smaller, we certainly have funds that are regulated by the SEC, and we still have purview there. We're allowed to be a little bit organizationally a little bit more nimble, where we don't have quite as much compliance maybe as some of our larger peers do, where we can kind of move fast and build the plane while we're flying it in terms of adoption of AI and inserting tools, and that's what we've been doing, right? And Graham mentioned the rate of change of new model releases. I mean, just from 4.8 to 4.6 over a couple months has been a light year improvement in terms of analytical capabilities, the time and speed at which information can be processed from Claude. But we can jump on that and kind of ride the AI advancement wave pretty nimbly, whereas maybe some of our larger peers get approval to, okay, now you can start inserting AI tools into your workflows. It has to go through compliance review, and several attorneys are involved, and we can kind of move agile and fast.
I mean, historically, there always has been a cost to being large, right? Companies in any industry, they usually grow because there are advantages to scale. And in some respect, the power of these tools, gives smaller companies, in some cases, the same or even potentially greater capabilities, and reduces to some extent the advantages of scale. Proprietary data obviously is difficult to replicate, but what I found in my career is that proprietary data is often the hardest data to access. Right? The information is publicly available is usually available in a beautifully packaged API or export or something like that. Your proprietary data, I mean, I shudder to think what what it takes to aggregate the data across hundreds of Yardi instances in place at a company, very large national operators. But just because you have the data doesn't necessarily mean you can use it, right?
Right.
And it's a lot more difficult to do that. Maybe switching gears one more time here to talk about team and culture. Dave, you already mentioned, you sort of worry a little bit about, the next generation coming up without some of the experiences you had, right? Doing some of this stuff from first principles, building models, looking at deals without the advantages of these agents, these AIs. For both of you, I'm wondering, how do you sort of see, typical real estate organization evolving in terms of, skill set, maybe, balance between senior folks and junior folks? Is there just less junior folks, more principals? Like, what are your thoughts, Graham?
Um, I I actually don't see the team structure changing dramatically. I think Dave kind of hit on it, where these tools can make you more efficient at underwriting and evaluating opportunities, but they ultimately can't make decisions. That is still going to come down to the structure that we have in place. I do think it allows us to operate the team differently, and perhaps expand the number of opportunities at the top of the funnel that we're evaluating, even within our own portfolio, allows us to, have a leverage our own data to evaluate and to hopefully improve, or not hopefully, but to improve operations at assets and how we choose to operate assets, um, and truly, grow value and grow NOI. I think all of these tools are applicable to all of those use cases, but specifically to the team, I don't think it changes the structure, at least not dramatically, and not in the short term. That perhaps is maybe a misconception to some of the market commentary out there right now. What I do think it will change is the type of work and how we use our data and how we use the tools that we have available to us.
I mean, that might play into skill set potentially, right? Because just traditionally in a field like real estate investing, like in any sort of investing, have heavy emphasis on technical skills, right? Heavy emphasis on quantitative skills, analytical skills. Maybe it shifts a bit more in terms of some of these things, more subjective, right? Discipline, focus, being able to work alongside an army of agents, which from our experience, we found that it's almost a people management skill you need to work effectively with agents, right? Knowing how to coach them, how to rein them in, how to verify their work, etc. So maybe the teams are the same ish size and structure, but maybe the skill set's a bit different. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree with everything that Graham had said. I do think, yeah, from a structuring standpoint, it may look a little different, but in terms of headcount, I think that we're kind of where we need to be to scale and grow our business. I don't think we're going to be adding more people per se. I don't think we're going to be losing folks either. I think we've all seen the real benefit of AI is you can do more with the same. I don't think we've proven we can do more with less right now. That remains to be seen. But in terms of like what the next generation, what does this mean for the next generation? I think what it means is we who are maybe a little bit more senior in the industry, it's going to be incumbent upon us to kind of truly create an apprenticeship type program where we're going to have to sit down with these entry level folks, or maybe, folks who've been in the industry for a couple of years and carve out time to, okay, let's sit down, let's walk through the model and let's understand the logic that Claude or one of the other agents is using. Let me show you what to look out for. And then we're going to have to kind of get back to that level of training. So the work isn't going to be, okay, let's build the model, let's create the investment committee memo. I mean, we're already seeing that those processes can be automated very quickly. So now it's like, let's understand the fundamentals of the industry, what's important in a particular location, right? What do locational advantages make one investment better than another? Let's look at macro and micro risks. To a sub-market, let's focus on supply. So I think you're going to move out of the technical skills, like you said, Raj, and maybe a little bit more into just kind of the pure economics side of investing, where let's focus on what is really going to move the needle at the deal level, at the city level, at the street level. Let's understand those things. Let's look at macro forces, what's going to impact our ability to achieve our business plan. And then I think what Graham pointed out was operations. I think you're going to see a huge benefit from AI. And we're already seeing that too, where it took a long time to pull in all the data sets that you mentioned, Raj. A lot of it's proprietary, but it took a long time for us to pull in underlying data for a particular property, synthesize it, analyze it, put together scenario analysis on, okay, if we push rents here, what is that going to do to vacancy? All of this can be generated in a scenario analysis environment inside an LLM. So I think the focus on operations and the ability to get more from your portfolio performance is going to be a real value enhancement tool for all of us. And that's where, as an industry, those who really focus on driving operations in the last 4 years have, I think, distanced themselves, because cap rate compression is gone, right? What bailed out a lot of firms in You didn't really have to be a great operator. And if cap rates went from, 5 to 3.5, you did great. And we're not forecasting, I don't think any of us, cap rates going back to 3.5 again. So we're really focused on operations.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that kind of along those lines that we definitely believe is that, these technologies don't smooth out differences in firms between firms when it comes to their existing operations. It magnifies them, right? To the extent
Correct.
you've invested historically in, good data, good systems, good processes, when you then add the power of AI, it actually it just magnifies that advantage you have. Um, Last question for both of you. Just curious if, as you think about, where you are on the journey now, what you're currently using this tech for, and maybe what you're not yet using it for, but you're sort of thinking about, like, what opportunity kind of excites you the most around where this can go, within your firms, within your lives. What aren't you doing with AI that you can't wait until you can, or you kind of get to it. I'll start with you, Grant.
I mean, I think we're still early. I think I wonder how long we'll continue to say we're still early in this journey, because it might be for a long time that we are early in the journey. That to me is probably the most exciting part. Is that if you'd asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have been excited about things that today are so standard and really table stakes. Um,
Mhm.
so in some ways, I'm excited for what's to come, but fully aware that I don't know what is to come. That's maybe a too loose of an answer, but yeah, I'd say specifically, I think there's a lot that can be done around connecting data that we're still just in early innings of. We've done a little bit of it and we're getting better at it, but I think there's going to be some really interesting insights that come out of our own QuadReal's own portfolio, but then broadly how we can connect that into the broader market and the amount of information that remains to be connected and really drive meaningful insight out of that. I think there's a lot of interesting things out there, but it's the type of insight that would change how we otherwise would look at decisions. Something that for example, like we wouldn't have been able to make that decision without the connection that was created or the insight that was driven from that AI model.
I mean, it's interesting that you landed there, because that really has been the biggest problem in real estate investing for as long as I've been at it. It's just the fragmentation of data, which fundamentally kind of stems from the fragmentation of the deal flow, right? The fact that so much of what we do doesn't really live anywhere central, right? It's all you know very, very sort of disconnected and siloed. And there've been so many attempts over the years to solve for this data fragmentation. And AI, maybe able to make some inroads. Dave, how about you?
I mean, I think similar to Graham, what we're struggling with, or I wouldn't say struggling because we are putting a lot of focus on integration, and getting systems to talk with one another. I, I don't think that people appreciate who are early, and we all are kind of early in this AI journey, like Graham talked about, because it changes so rapidly. But I think those who are further along in their journey, the thing they continually are surprised about is there's no out of the box solution off the shelf. Download it into your browser, or get a subscription, and all of a sudden everything's fully plugged in, and there's no system that's out there that, and I don't know, frankly, that could be years away, where an out of the box solution helps plug in all these different data sources. So I feel like we're very early into that. We're making a push week by week to get another system integrated and connected. So I'm excited when we get to, I don't know, pick a number, 80% of our systems are fully integrated and talking to one another, to see what is possible. But I was talking to one of my colleagues last week, and he sits right behind me, and and I was out on vacation. He said, I literally had my most productive week in my entire professional career last week, because of, this system, the centralized overlay that we've built out, and the amount of information that you can pull, that you're not having to sift through files and folders. Like, it's a prompt, it's generate narrative text for me, do an analysis. It's amazing to watch this work in real time. And what I'm excited about is the time that we can reallocate to focusing on strategy and, investment level decisions, and not producing work. It's evaluating work. So I think that what we pride ourselves historically as being, very analytical and disciplined and thoughtful on the investments that we make, we're going to be able to spend even more time, looking backward. What decisions were incorrect? What about the business plan that we assume went wrong? A lot of post-mortem evaluation, so that we can do it right, and improve the prompts and improve our aggregation of data more so on the front end going forward. I'm very excited about that. I think our work is going to become much more enriched over time. It's less about again, the collating information and even the analyzing of it. It's okay, we have all the information set here. What do we do with it? Scenario analysis. I mean, it's going to be fun, and fun for the junior folks too. As much as, and I've been in the business now for, 23 years, and going back to the early 2000s, when I pulled multiple all-nighters building out Excel models and programming macros. And like, I tell my analyst pools that I've hired over the years, oh, you have no idea what that's like. It was much harder when I was, it was kind of a badge of honor, like putting together these 120-page investment committee memos. Like, that's gone. Like, there's even no need for them to spend that. They couldn't spend that amount of time anymore, even if they wanted to produce the same output. So quality of life's going to get better. They're going to spend more time, in the trenches on investment decisions at an earlier point in their career. I'm excited for that. I think our work is going to become a lot more interesting.
It's a very positive way to end things. And yeah, for all the, sort of, doom and gloom out there around how this is going to impact, particularly junior folks, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of stuff to be excited and optimistic about as well. The ability to do more value add and more interesting work early in your career, and by avoiding the drudgery that we all had to do early in our careers. And the thrill that comes from just crushing a week's worth of work in half a day. It's this stuff can make work a lot of fun. So we'll leave it there. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Dave. Maybe we'll check in 6 months and see where we're at that point. I'm sure there'll be more lessons to share, and more things we weren't expecting to have happened. Will probably have happened by then. But thank you both very much.